Hey everyone, welcome back to some Friday Path of Exile build shenanigans, and today we are playing Flicker Strike with the Saviour as a Scion. So a quick reminder that the gameplay will get a bit hectic, and if you suffer from epilepsies, you may wanna skip this one for the sake of your health. However, in the case that you're still watching, I'll be doing my usual routine of showcasing the character's gear, skill tree and some gameplay and bosses. Having said that, this character is also abusing the accessibility of Harvest to go a little bit overkill, so keep that in mind. Anyways, if you are new around here, be sure to hit that fat subscribe button and join us on the channel, otherwise a rating and a comment help us defeat the YouTube algorithm. As always, you can skip to the timestamp on screen for the boss fights, or you can also follow the timestamps on the comments or in the description. With all of that being said, let's begin this Flicker Stroke build guide. Okay, so this is a level 92 Scion, and that is important because my character currently has a relatively low amount of HP. 5100, and in your case I would recommend going for 94 so that you can take Heart of the Water and give yourself something like 400 more hit points and make your character a little bit more tough, which at the end of the day is gonna come in hand, you know, especially when fighting bosses. That is gonna help you a lot, which is why I recommend going higher. But besides that, we are playing as a Scion that is both Slayer and Raider. And Slayer for the cooling strike, the Fist Reflect immunity, and also the life leech effects thingy. And as a Raider for the attack damage, but mostly for the 10% chance to gain a frenzy charge on hit against unique or rare enemies, which is gonna help us immensely while fighting stuff, since our body armor is giving us 10% chance to gain a frenzy, and Flicker Strike itself has 20%, and that is gonna help us with the single target, mostly since we are gonna use Blood Rage to sustain our frenzies during mapping. So yeah. With that said, for stuff that I wanna point out on the skill tree, we are using a Lethal Pride with Warriors under Akoya so that we can turn any keystone inside its range into Chain Breaker. And that is gonna make it so that we generate 3 rage per second while we lose 5 rage when we hit an enemy. And that isn't as important because the rage is mostly used to trigger Berserk for single target. So during mapping it isn't as bad to lose the rage stacks. Besides that, make sure that your Lethal Pride has a role that actually helps you in the long run. For example, I've got fist damage over here in Golem's Blood, also some fire resistance under Savagery, and also some melee crit chance under Bravery. And while I know that getting an exact copy of my Lethal Pride is gonna be a little bit difficult, try to experiment and get one that actually helps your character in the long run, with the notes that you are taking inside its range, so that you can get an additional bit of damage or survivability. However, if you check out the POV that I will leave in the description below, this Lethal Pride is not getting taken into account, so if you have any question, let me know, but at the same time, this is why I am explaining this right now. Besides that, this character is pretty much fist only, which means we want to take Impale stuff near the duelist area. We also want some Impale stuff near the Scion start, and we are also going to be playing with crit, which means we want critical stuff over here, some crit stuff over here, the sword crit notes over here, and some additional sword stuff over here, and one-handed stuff over here. Besides that, we also take the Fortify stuff because we use Fortify in our gem setup, and we also take Call to Arms to make Enduring Cry, you know, instant, while also taking some additional Warcry stuff over here for damage and healing. And besides that, we also take Unwavering Stance to become stun immune, and since we are flickering at match speed sometimes, we don't want to stop, and Unwavering Stance is pretty much mandatory. And finally, for important stuff in the skill tree, we are using 3, you know, cluster jewels, a large one with 8 passives, and this time around we are gonna take every notable inside the range. So we have Drive the Destruction, Smite the Weak, and Fuel the Fight. And this is mostly so that we get some life leech, mana leech, and maimed enemies get to take additional damage. Since we've got some chance to maim on Smite the Weak and Drive the Destruction, and our totems are linked to maim itself, so that way we can deal additional damage, especially during single target. And for medium cluster jewels, we've got Exploit Weakness and Evil Eye, as you know, a 5 passive cluster jewel, and the other one has Lead by Example and Haunting Shout. Lead by Example is gonna give us Onslaught every time we Warcry, and Haunting Shout is gonna intimidate enemies under our Warcry range, so that is pretty important. Besides that, for jewels on the tree, you know, the Lethal Pride, and we are using a Watcher's Eye that has additional impales while using Pride. If you cannot get this, crit multi with precision or attack damage with Pride or precision are equally as good, so you've got options if you cannot afford a Watcher's Eye with the additional impales. And the regular jewels, which are only 2 this time around, no, 3, sorry, we've got Life, reduced mana cost of skills, either melee crit chance or melee crit multi, and attack speed or attack damage, if you can get it. Maybe some chaos resistance like this one over here. But that's gonna be it for the skill tree portion, and now we're gonna take a look at the gear that the character is wearing. Okay, so for the gear that the character is using, remember that this is Harvest, so a couple of things are a little bit, you know, over the top because the league enables that. But besides that, if you are playing this outside Harvest, try to keep your gear expectations a little bit realistic. With that said, first is the Astur La Raza, which has Life, chance to gain a Frenzy Charge on hit, the enemies you kill explode, increased dexterity, and instead of Chaos Resistance, I've got Power Charge on critical strike, since I was able to do that early on the week. And personally, I don't think the Power Charges are that useful because they are not up most of the time. But besides that, we mostly want the Frenzy Charge and the enemies you kill explode, which means I recommend slamming together a Crusader and a Redeemer body armor and working off whatever you get from the end result. Because at the end of the day, getting a 1-to-1 copy to my body armor is gonna be a bit expensive and also quite the feat, especially this late into the league. So it isn't mandatory to get a 1-to-1 copy, but get something as close to mine. Now for the first ring, which is a rare Warlord influenced 2-stone ring, it has fist damage attacks, melee damage, life, vulnerability, chaos race, and global crit multi. I know that this is pretty much everything you could have ever wanted in a ring, especially if you are playing Impale and melee, but in your case I would recommend just working off the vulnerability, the life, and maybe some resistances, and if possible getting fist damage or the crit multi using the garden, because if you are outside Harvest, I don't think getting something as close to this is gonna be realistic. But I know that mine is a little bit, you know, over the top, and I know that not everyone is gonna be able to get something as close to this, so yeah, work off the curse and hit, the life, and maybe some resists, and if possible additional DPS stuff that you can add through the use of the garden. Moving on to the other ring, which is a Circle of Guilt. This one is the same one I used with the Duelist Ground Slam and the Cyclone, and I think the Impaling Split Arrow. And this one has Herald of Purity buff effect and fist damage while affected by Herald of Purity, while also having attributes and global fist as an implicit. And I do recommend using a Circle of Guilt because the buffs we get while using Herald of Purity are too good to pass up, especially since we're playing with Impale and fist only, and you know, DPS, always good. Moving on to the amulet, we've got an amulet that has Dexterity and Intelligence as the implicit, life, fist damage attacks, crit multi, some resistances, and also negative total mana cost of skills that I crafted, while having Panopticon allocated since we use an Ancestral Protector and an Ancestral Warchief, or at least the Vaal Ancestral Warchief, for single target, and Panopticon gives us a lot of buffs while both of them are up, so that's why we use that notable. But besides that, in your case, I recommend getting an amulet that has the crit multi and the life as the base, and then using the garden to force the other stuff. That is how I crafted mine. I had increased lightning damage and I turned it into lightning resistance, and I also had fist damage glitched as life, and using the garden I was able to turn that into fist damage to attacks. The cold resistance was augmented at the end, and in the end, if you can get something like this, that'd be great. And I do recommend, you know, crafting it yourself, because something like this is probably a bit expensive, so keep that in mind. For the helmet, we are using a Crown of the Inward Eye, and I do not recommend using this helmet unless you've covered every single resistance, attribute or accuracy need that you may have on the rest of your gear. Once you've got all of that, then yes, you can use a Crown of the Inward Eye. Until then, I do not recommend at all using this helmet. I'm using it because I found one with the enchantment for an Exile, and that is why I decided to invest into it, but in your case I will recommend using a regular rare with the stuff you require. Maybe Warlord influenced for global crit multi, or Elder influenced for the nearby enemies take increased face damage. But besides that, you know, try to get something that actually works in your character. For the gloves, we've got spike gloves with Warlord influence for the maximum frenzy charge, and mine has life, face damage attacks, resistances, and I crafted the global crit chance. In your case, getting something like this probably gonna be pretty goddamn expensive. So what I recommend that you do is use a regular pair of gloves with just the maximum frenzy charge, the life and the resistances, and maybe the craft that I've got. And if you can get spike gloves, that's great. If you can't, then don't sweat it. At the end of the day, yes, this is pretty, you know, amazing, but at the end of the day, this is harvest, and getting stuff like this is kinda the norm. So in your case, if you can't get it, don't sweat it, just try to get something as close to this guy. The belt is the Stygian bias that the last character was using, but this time it has increased melee damage during any flask effect instead of dexterity and intelligence. And it also has life, increased life, global face damage, and resistances. Something like this in trade is gonna be pretty fucking expensive, so I recommend that you craft it yourself. Absolutely craft it yourself. And it is gonna be a little bit difficult to craft it yourself, but at the end of the day it is worth it, so make sure you get something as close to this guy. And for the jewel on the belt, we've got life, accuracy, global crits multi, and that's pretty much the important stuff on the jewel. For other stuff that you can also get, face damage to sword attacks, face damage to attacks, maybe some attack speed, maybe some crit chance, but the accuracy is probably gonna be mandatory. For boots, I'm also using a pair of boots that I am reusing from the Cyclone character that I did a couple of weeks ago. This one has life, resistances, since they are two-toned boots. We also got additional resistances, and tailwind on a critical strike. And I recommend that you craft your boots yourself, because at the end of the day, again, these guys are expensive. Tailwind, while being something common nowadays, it's still a pretty sought after modifier, which means something as close are gonna ravage your bank, so make sure you can craft them yourself. And finally, for weapons, we are using the Saviour, because it is a budget weapon nowadays, and a Paradoxica instead of a Rapier, because we do have the dexterity, you know, covered. So that is why we're using both of these guys. And I will recommend using them because at the end of the day we are building around the Saviour's ability of cloning yourself and doubling your damage. If you do not want to use the Saviour, another Paradoxica or a Rapier are good options, you know, to deal damage. And for flasks, we've got a Diamond Flask, a Bottle Faith, and a Lion's Roar. And for the gem setups, we've got Flicker Strike linked to Close Combat, Multi-Strike, Brutality, Fortify, and Impale. So it is absolutely mandatory to get a white socket on your body armor so that you can replace Close Combat with Melee Splash during single target, so make sure you use Borichi on research to get that white socket. Otherwise you're gonna have to use Awakened Melee Fist Damage, which is gonna be less DPS than Close Combat. So for the rest of the gems, we've got Summonize Golem, Blood Rage, a Berserk, we use Enduring Cry and Flame Dash linked to Second Wind. On the gloves we've got Vaal Ancestral War Chief, Ancestral Protector, both of them linked to an Empower level 4, and Maim. And on the boots we've got Herald of Purity, a low level Precision, Pride, and an Enlighten level 3. If you can get Enlighten level 4, that'd be great, so that you can level up the Precision additionally, but otherwise just level it up to a point where you're comfortable with your mana pool. So yeah, that's gonna be it for this character. I know that in relation to other characters, the build guide is a little bit shorter, I think, And that is mostly because this character is late in the league, and I know that at this point only the most hardcore harvesters are still harvesting. So yeah, that's gonna be it for me today. I'm gonna leave you with the gameplay of the bosses or whatever I've got, and I hope that you enjoyed tonight's video. So with that said, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a great weekend. Subscribe if you haven't done so, or leave a comment and a rating to defeat the YouTube algorithm. So yeah, again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.